All right. Well, welcome to another episode of the Leadership Download. We're here doing an in-person recording with Travis and myself. Today, we're going to be talking about maintaining yourself. So, Travis, what does this mean when we're talking about maintaining yourself?
Yeah, when I think about maintaining myself, I was talking to a mentor of mine a couple of months ago, and I was going through a tough time where I was really overextending myself and kind of not working on, having any kind of balance in my life. And I remember he looked at me, just stood me stone cold face, and just looked at me and he says, if you go down, it's no good for anyone else. He says the reality is, Travis, if you go down, if you burn out, then not only are you affecting yourself, but you're affecting others. And the fact is, you go from becoming an asset to a liability. You become from being someone who's a provider and someone who adds to the picture to be someone who actually takes away from the picture. So it perked my interest, and it perked my concern, because suddenly I'm realizing, yes, as much as I wanted to be an asset in these situations, the reality is, if I can't get control of myself and maintain myself well, then I was going to become a liability, and then I'm good to no one.
Yeah, Travis, you want to make sure when you talk about maintaining yourself that you look after yourself before you're looking after others. Oftentimes in leadership is all about looking after your people,
Yeah.
taking care of them, kind of like taking care of them as a flock of sheep,
Yeah.
right? Looking after them. It's all about your team, making sure that you're looking after them, you're rewarding them, you're holding them accountable. But oftentimes it comes to a point where we forget to even like eat sometimes, take care of ourselves, do what we need to treat ourselves properly. And I think it's really important to have that proper balance. Is first, you got to put yourself
Yeah.
first and foremost. Yes, this might sound selfish, but you have to take care of yourself first. And that could mean in several ways. Make sure you're getting proper sleep, making sure that you find time for your family. And then that way you'll be able to support your team properly.
Yeah, I mean, it's so important to just think about it here. One of the things I wrote down here is make sure that you're looking after yourself before you go to support others. If you're on an airplane and an airplane loses, it loses pressure at 30,000 feet, what happens? The mask comes down. And if the mask comes down, what do they tell you? They say, put on your mask first. See, you are in no shape to take care of someone else if you're not taking care of yourself first. You have to position yourself well enough that you are actually able to take care of others on your team. Don't support others at the expense of your long term detriment. If it's hurting you, that means that ultimately you're going to get to a point where you are a liability, not just to yourself, but to your organization, to your family, to everyone in general. And that is what we want to avoid. We want to be, as leaders, we want to be an asset, which means sometimes we have to step back and allow ourselves to rest. What does this mean for us as leaders when we talk about this idea that we need to maintain ourselves? And I think the number one thing we want to lean into is understanding that we must be wise to know our limits. We have to know the limits, or know our limits and our strengths. You see, when we invest in our strengths, when we invest in the things that we're good at, we oftentimes can provide a multitude of resources, a multitude of productivity. But when we try to lean into things we're not good at, things that we're naturally just not gifted in, these are the things that ends up creating us and making us a liability to our organizations, to our families.
Yeah, and limits are something that sometimes it's really difficult to do, is to know your limits. But once you understand where your limits are, even with fatigue, even a simple work day, knowing when to stop, knowing when to shut down the computer, turn off the emails, because sometimes it's so hard to turn it off. You just get emails after email after email, and
Yeah.
you just can't stop. And going back to your point on strengths, I think it's so sometimes we try to be the experts at everything that we do. We try to be the know-it-all, and really, you cannot be the know-it-all. You're only good at so much stuff when it comes to work, and I think it's important to build upon your strengths and get better at that, and take it to a whole nother level rather than focus on trying to be that person, that jack of all trades.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really important to understand that, when we lean into our strengths, when we lean into the things that we're good at, that helps us become the asset that we want to be. But we're constantly muddling around in the things that we are already weak in, it does nothing but drain us.
Mm-hmm.
It's a constant drain, and it's a constant conflict in our being that causes us issues, and oftentimes will not allow us to maintain ourselves. The second thing we want to go talk about is having a personal professional boundaries and sticking to them. Understanding the boundaries that you need to have between work and your home life. Like you just said, knowing when to shut down the computer and when to walk away from it. And this has become an even bigger issue with COVID, right? So, thousands of people around the world have now took jobs where they're now working from home. Suddenly, before it was they went into an office, worked 9 to 5 or whatever their hours were, they left the office and the day ended. Now it is very easy for your day to be extended simply because your office is in your home.
Mm-hmm.
It makes it harder to walk away. It makes it harder for you to not eat dinner, then go right back to work.
Mm-hmm.
So when we begin to set these boundaries, we set these expectations and we stick to them. We continue to make sure that we have the strength and we have the brain clarity that we need to continue to be an asset. See, sometimes I think that we look at situations like this and we say, the asset to the company is the person who's willing to work 80 hours a week. And that may be true for a very limited amount of time. But at some point, we've all seen that employee that's running nonstop, 80 hours a week. And then 6 months later, they're being terminated because they couldn't keep up, or they just stopped doing their job. Mm-hmm. The reason behind that is because they did not maintain themselves in that situation. They looked directly to, they just didn't take care of themselves, and they end up falling apart.
Yeah, and boundaries are so important. I think it's very important to so that you maintain effectiveness professionally and personally. I think that's very important when we talk about this topic of maintaining yourself, because if you don't set those boundaries, and boundaries, you might, as we bring up this topic, you might say, oh, well, my boss calls me sometimes at 6 o'clock at night or 7 o'clock at night. Well, for like the way I try to envision this, it's a personal choice, whether you want to pick up that phone call or not, or respond to that late evening email or early morning email. It's a personal choice of when you want to turn it on and turn it off. And professional boundaries, it's you set it. You set the expectations for wherever you work. When you want to work, when you want to answer phone calls. Be selective maybe with the emails that you respond to after hours, so that you can maintain effectiveness in both areas, professionally and personally.
Yeah, absolutely. And moving on to the final point, is have the discipline and fortitude to say no, thank you. This it speaks for itself. All of us have, most people have this desire and need to please people. They want to make people happy. They want to make family members happy. They want to make their boss happy. But the reality is we have to have the ability to say no to some things. We cannot say yes to everything. In fact, we have to learn to say no to good things so we can say yes to great things. Mm-hmm. Having that fortitude and understanding that we have to do that is that third piece to maintaining ourselves, learning to say no.
Yep. I was a yes person myself early on in my leadership when I was a very, very young leader, and it leads to burnout. When you start saying too many yeses, can't handle it, It's not a good story. And then you're going to struggle both professionally and personally.
Absolutely. So these three things, just think about just going through them one more time. Lean on your strengths, know your limits, having personal and professional boundaries, and having the discipline and fortitude to say no. If we lean into those three things, we will take massive steps in being able to maintain ourselves well. So take those three things, review them in your life, to kind of assess yourself and see where you're at and see where you need to make changes. We thank you guys so much for joining us on another edition of the Leadership Download. We thank you guys for engaging with us, sharing our content, and trusting us with your time. And we'll catch you guys on the next episode.
See ya.